back and welcome to my April wrap up. I had a pretty good reading month for April. I read almost everything that was on my TBR. I did a sort of mid-month check-in and added a couple of other things to my TBR which I did not read. That kind of changed a little bit. If you want to go back and check out my TBR, I will leave it linked up here. But yeah, as always, I will break this down into ebooks, physical books and audiobooks to let you know what format I read these in. Some of them I have as physical books, even though I read them as one of the other formats. I read 13 books, 1 novella and 2 part books in the month of April, and I'll get on to exactly what all of those are as we go through the wrap up. So physical books first, because they're right here. I read William Shakespeare's Much Ado About Mean Girls, which was sent to me for review by Quirk Books. This was really funny and really cool. I think it's one of those where probably seeing the movie would be an advantage to this one, so that you kind of know what's going on, or else having a real kind of way with the Shakespearean language, because I'm not so great with the Shakespearean language. So being able to follow along from what I knew about the film was definitely helpful. I have a review of this one on my blog. My blog and all my social media channels are always linked below. So if you want to go and check out my review of this one, just click in the link in the description box. Then I did a couple of buddy reads this month. One of them was this book, which is A Woman Is No Man by Etaf Rum. This just blew me away as to how good it was. It was so much better than I was expecting it to be. Not that I bought this book from Book of the Month thinking that it was going to be anything less than good. But this is dual timeline, 2 Palestinian women. There's a big secret somewhere. Somebody's dead when they shouldn't be. How does it all link together? And it's set in Brooklyn, and I just, it was so good. I haven't written my review for this one yet. I only found that out yesterday, so I will try and get a review of this one up on the blog soon if you are waiting for one. But it was great. I read this with my friend Jenna. I will leave her blog linked down below, and we both loved it and we had a really good time discussing it. We read it in 3 sittings, and yeah, definitely recommend this one. Then another book that was sent to me by Quirk Books. Quirk have been so wonderful to me this month. I'm looking forward to going and seeing them again when I go back to BookCon this year, because that's when we kind of, met last year, which was nice. This is A Beautiful Day in the Neighbourhood, which is the poetry of Mr. Rogers, which is just lovely. And I was able to read this with a couple of children as well, so I was able to share some poems that I thought were just beautiful with them. The illustrations are absolutely gorgeous, and then some of the poems in here makes me wish that I'd been able to watch the series when it was originally on. Like A, the illustrations on that one, and then B, the actual poem itself is absolutely glorious. And this one, Under the Dust Jacket, is exactly the same, which I think is really cool. And then the end pages of this one, I have featured these on my Instagram because I just loved it. So review of this one will be coming soon on the blog. I only just finished this one in the month of April, so that's why my review of this one isn't up yet. But Quirk sent me some good books this month. I'm very lucky. Then moving on to some ebooks, I read A View to a Kilt by Wendy Holden, which was part 3 in a series. You definitely don't have to have read the other parts in this series to understand what's going on in this book. I hadn't read them, and I still was able to follow what was going on. I liked this book. It was okay. I didn't love it. For a book set in Scotland, I'd been hoping to get some more Scottish landscapes, some Scottish things out of it. You know I love Scotland. I have Glasgow tattooed on my body somewhere, for heaven's sake. So yeah, it wasn't quite Scottish enough for me, but I think that if you're not as passionately into Scotland as I am, you will probably be okay with the amount of Scottishness in the book. Yeah, it was funny in parts, and it was just all right. I'm not being like, recommend, read now, but if you fancy it with something light and escapist, and definitely with some funny bits, it was all right. Then the novella I read was part 4 of Wildflower Park by Bella Osborne. I kind of read this in March. You know, my March and my April kind of ended up merging because I was traveling. So I did read this, I think, right at the end of March, but I included it in my April wrap-up because I didn't include it in my March wrap-up. And this came out on the 29th of April, so on Monday. This part 4 came out, and we only have a few more weeks to wait for the bind up of Wildflower Park parts 1, 2, 3 and 4 to come out as their own novel. So highly recommend this one. I absolutely love this series. I do like reading it as small parts because I can read it all at once, and then I get excited about waiting for the next one to come out, whether I get a review copy or whether I've pre-ordered it and I'm waiting for it to hit my Kindle. Either way, it's very exciting to wait for. And yeah, definitely recommend this series. And then the kind of one of the half books that is on my list, you know, I said I've got 2 part books on top of the 13 and a novella, is Poppy's Recipe for Life by Heidi Swain. This was very firmly on my April TBR. I was really hoping to finish it before the end of April, but I didn't want to rush and finish it because I'm really enjoying it. So it's kind of on my May TBR, and it's kind of on my April wrap-up because I'm almost bang on 50% on my Kindle right now, and it comes out at the end of May. So technically it is a May release, so it will be in the May TBR to some extent, but it will be the first book I finish in the month of April. May, yes. It will be the first book, physical book, that I finish reading in the month of May. Oh my goodness, tripping over myself. Then a book that I have made a whole video about, so I will leave it linked up here, and that is Sleep by C.L. Taylor. I read this on ebook on an aeroplane. As I read a lot of C.L. Taylor's books, I don't need to say any more about this one because I made a whole video about it, so go and watch the video. I will gush over it there. Enough to say that I just highly recommend this one. It's beautiful, and this is her first hardback, so I was able to buy a hardback before coming back from the UK. So exciting. And then another one that I have just received. I read an ebook copy of this one. I reviewed it on the blog, so you can go and read my review of this one because I absolutely loved it. And this was another one that I loved so much more than I was expecting to. I thought I was going to like it. I was excited to read it. I read it right at the beginning of the month, and then I ordered myself the Waterstones signed edition of this one and had it shipped over here, and that is The Flat Chair by Beth O'Leary. It is just a gorgeous book. Even the teacup detail on the spine, the fact that this is all raised lettering, and then we've got this gorgeous gold colour. And then, are you ready? You ready for this? Oh yes, it has sprayed edges. It has glorious sprayed edges to match with the font on the front. And it is also a signed copy, so that is going to go up on my signed shelf because it is a beautiful book inside and outside. Highly recommend this one. Just so good, and so kind of like inclusive, which is more and more unusual in a lot of kind of women's fiction or contemporary new releases adult wise, so I like how inclusive it was. Then moving on to audiobooks, an audiobook that I received from Penguin Random House Audio in order for me to review it was Southern Lady Code by Helen Ellis. I read Helen Ellis's American Housewife last year, I believe, and really enjoyed that. So when I saw that she was narrating the audiobook of this one herself, I knew I had to read it. I've popped a review of it on the blog. It's non-fiction, which you know I love on audio. I really enjoyed it. Really recommend it. It was excellent. Then I read The Rosy Result by Graham Simpson. I did have an ebook review copy of this one. However, the first 2 books in the Rosie Project series I have listened to on audiobook, so I wanted to do this on audio as well because that narrator is Don Tillman for me. And I finished listening to this one whilst I was at Heathrow Airport, ready to fly back, and then listen to the very last little bit on the plane. But I was getting my steps in, walking around Heathrow, listening to what was going on with Don now. It was really funny. It was a great kind of conclusion to the trilogy. If you like The Rosie Project, you'll definitely like this one. I love a bit of Graham Simpson anyway. And then I decided kind of late in the day to reread for the second time the I Heart series by Lindsay Kelk, ready for the final book in the series, I Heart Hawaii, which comes out in the UK on the 30th of May to come out. I'm very excited to read it. However, I do want to read the other books first. So I read the first 2 books in the series in the month of April. Did that by listening to them on audiobook. My library has them on audiobook, which I'm really lucky about. And the last time I did a reread of them, ready for I Heart Forever, which was 2 years ago, I did them on audiobook as well. And I think they're incredibly well narrated. So I read I Heart New York and I Heart Hawaii. So there's a spoiler for what's going to be on my May TBR there, isn't there? And then on a completely different note, I listened to Columbine by Dave Cullen. It was the, I want to say the 20th anniversary of Columbine this month. And so I agreed to do this as a buddy read. The buddy read itself didn't work out, but I enjoyed listening to the audiobook. I learned a lot. It was narrated by the author, so it sounded very personal. Obviously, I live in Denver, so it's close to home. I know where it all took place. And yes, whilst I was listening to it, all the schools here were closed for a day because there was a woman who was obsessed with Columbine, had made threats on the schools. It was a bit of a manhunt for her, and so it just really brought it all home. Like, it was just really spooky that I was listening to that and then that happened at the same time. But yeah, definitely recommend that one. And then a couple that I actually have here to show you that I did on audiobook. I listened to Pulp by Robin Talley. If you've been following me for a while, you'll know that I am a big fan of Robin Talley. I read her first novel and was just absolutely blown away by it. She writes fabulous stories about these wonderfully independent queer characters who are just such a pleasure to read about. This one is well, here's the tagline: 2 queer teens 60 years apart, connected by the power of storytelling. And this is a book about lesbian pulp fiction, which I didn't know that this whole kind of corner of the market existed. And then I read this. I will say it was a bit of a slow start. I did think about giving up on it, but I persisted and I was rewarded, because after that initial, like 20% maybe, it was probably about 20%. After that, it got so good and it got so compelling, and I listened to the last bits of it in like a couple of big chunks because I really enjoyed it. This is young adult, definitely recommend it. Then another book of the month, book that I have kind of knocked out here. I listened to The Book of Essie by Megan McLean Weir. This one is about the story of a 17-year-old daughter of an evangelical preacher, star of the family's hit reality TV show, and the secret pregnancy that threatens to blow her entire world apart. And this book has 3 different voices in it. It is triple narrative, which I love. I don't like too many narrators, but dual or triple narrative, oh yes, I do love. And this was, again, kind of one of those that was a little bit better than I expected it to be, which I need to stop saying that about books, because I do go in with high expectations. It's not that I don't go in with expectations, but I enjoyed this one and definitely recommend the audio, because the 3 different narrators have 3 different voices, so you can distinguish who's talking when. And yeah, just really enjoyed it. And then I had one book that I didn't finish. I started it on, well, I got it out the library as a physical book. Then I got the audiobook and decided to do it on audiobook. It was on my TBR. I thought I was going to love it and I just didn't, unfortunately. So I decided to give up on it because I couldn't have told you what was going on. And that is American Pop by Snowden Wright. This is The story of a family, the story of an empire, the story of a nation. Moving from Mississippi to Paris to New York and back again. A saga of family, ambition, passion and tragedy that brings to life one unforgettable Southern dynasty, the Forsters, founder of the world's first major soft drink company against the backdrop of more than a century of American cultural history. So it does jump about a bit. There's a lot of family members' names to take in. You're kind of dropped in the middle of everything, and I think I just struggled to kind of take on board all the different names and times and places and people. And yeah, it just wasn't for me. I'm sure it would be for someone else, but I decided not to finish it because, you know, I had a load of other books that I really loved reading. So didn't quite manage to keep it too short, but I hope that's given you a nice insight into what I read this April. My next video will be my May TBR, so make sure you are subscribed so that lands in your subscription feed. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments your favourite book that you read in the month of April, and I will be back with my May TBR soon, so I will see you then. Bye.